moving ahead with our second panel discussion session. This session is going to be moderated again by Dr. Deepak Kumar Sahu, Chief Editor, Bar India. Dr. Deepak has moderated various industry forums. He is going to briefly introduce the distinguished panel and then start the debate. This debate session topic is going to be accelerating your business transformation strategy.
Good afternoon, friends. Welcome to the panel discussion session 2. The topic is accelerating your business transformation strategy. With the growing cyber attacks, virtually every sizable enterprise and government entity knows the critical importance of taking pains to protect their data. CISOs are under stress due to mounting threats, compliance pressures, and growing complexity. Most businesses are aware of the importance of cybersecurity and taking preventive measures to mitigate cybersecurity risks. CIOs are facing concern at the end-to-end protection. Thank you, panelists. It is an absolute pleasure to be here. Welcome to all of you in the room and also joining us online. I would like to highlight the importance of cybersecurity for the business transformation, since this issue is pressing problems for millions of SMEs and enterprises across the country. Everyone is requested to keep their answer short as possible. I would like to do a quick introduction to all our star panelists on the dais. On the above backdrop, I would like to request I would like to introduce Mr. Atul Govil, Chief Transformation Officer and Head SAP and IT, India Glycols, Dr. Harold DaCosta, Director, Intelligent Question Security, Mr. Shiv Kumar Bhasin, Chief Technology and Operations Officer, National Stock Exchange India Limited, Mr. Chandra Mauli, Chief Information Technology Officer, Sankara Antralya, Mr. Harnath Babu, CIO, KPMG India, Mr. Peter Melrud, Chief Strategy Officer and co-founder, Chem Technologies. So welcome to all of you. This panel is focused on business transformation, but I'm going to start off with a question for all of our panelists. To start with, what is your view on shortage of skilled cybersecurity workforce, budget limitations, and remote working? Now we'll go understand from Mr. Harnath Babu, who is the CIO of KPMG India. Harnath, the question was, what is your view on shortage of skilled cybersecurity workforce, budget limitations, and remote working?
So Deepak, as we are adjusting to the new normal, which is powered by remote working and contactless payment, as just mentioned, we can see business accelerating in the digital agenda. Companies have substantial assets and data which are sitting in the digital form, and I think the threat of cybersecurity certainly haunts most of the organizations today. And with the rise of the cybersecurity risks that the organizations are facing today, I think it's important to have the right skill sets. We have shortage of skill sets for sure, but I think it's important to have our people trained in cybersecurity skills. It's important to make sure that they're aware of cybersecurity issues and they're able to address. It's more of a prevention than a cure. So what I would want to say is, as we are training our people, we have to also start putting responsibility on the CISOs. Make sure that they are, providing the continuous learning to their teams. They are keeping them updated on various aspects in terms of security. And as the new situation evolves, as we see new scenarios emerge, I think it's important for people to start correlating and addressing those issues. And I think one important aspect here is as you start working with different vendors and partners who have specialized skill sets, I think it's important to leverage those skill sets rather than trying to build everything on your own. What we're also seeing that the current situation has also brought in a lot of I would say stress in terms of business economics, right? So the cash flow obviously is a problem, and we are seeing that companies are getting a little frugal in terms of their spends. So I think what is important is to have to develop an integrated framework which obviously works on people, process, and technology, and create a very secure layered environment so that you are able to create the right skill sets for each layer of security that is required, and look at optimizing resources through more of an automation rather than completely making it people dependent. So that's my view, Deepak.
Okay, wonderful. So, Mr. Chandramouli, again, I have to come with
See, what I was just telling Deepak is the shortage of skills is a global issue, and it does impact all kinds of organization. And I don't think anyone has that luxury of having forced to deal with that. But it also depends upon the maturity of the industry and the maturity of the organization to deal with that, which would vary depending upon which kinds of businesses you have. Typically, digital businesses like financial services, retail, and other things would be in a much state of higher readiness because most of the businesses are already digital. And there are brick and mortar companies, say like healthcare, manufacturing, and others are at a much different level of readiness. But because of the rigidity of their businesses, they can't be completely on digital completely as well. So from our perspective, what we have done is we have a specialized team to deal with this, and we also work with outsourcing partners to help us on some of these machines where we can really deal with any kind of a skill shortage as we really deal with this. Because as an industry, particularly on healthcare, which is stressed on multiple levels, I think budget is an issue, skill is an issue, training is an issue. And definitely the remote working had been practiced even before for a limited number of people, but because of the nature of the industry, you definitely need to be in an hospital to do it. So the opportunity for a remote working in a healthcare is limited to certain variety of people, not exactly to all in sundry. So I think the industry varies depending upon where you work with, particularly the kind of feedback that we just get from National Stock Exchange and others, that would be a very different scenario. Brick and mortar companies say like healthcare, we have a very opposite view of what we may try to do, and it is still evolving.
Great. So we'll also understand from Atul Govil. Atul, are you there? Okay.
I'm there.
Atul,
I'm there.
I cannot
Yeah, I'm
see
there.
you.
I'm there. Yeah, hi, Deepak
You
ji.
have to repeat the answer what you said because I stopped, forgot recording. You have to start again the answer.
No, okay. It's all fine. Okay. What I was mentioning is that we've all seen every day's newspapers. No, we figure out that one or the other of these large Fortune 500 companies are getting some kind of data breach. So this is creating a lot of no risk for the enterprise, not from the standpoint of data loss only. It's also a credibility loss in the eyes of their stakeholders and their business partners as well. So and typically considering the COVID pandemic, there is a lot of remote working which has got started, and this has caused an exponential rise in the carpet area and the surface area of the attacks, and you are seeing a lot of cyber attacks happening. So in that context, I can tell you at one end these attacks have increased. At the other end, companies are struggling to maintain their cash flows. So and top of it, because the cybersecurity breaches are happening and new types of attacks are happening, so it is actually very difficult for companies in manufacturing per se to be able to cope up. So here we have to also rely on our partners to provide us these tools and these assessments, periodic assessments also, so that one, you have a continual view of what's happening and you keep doing course correction, and at the other end you also have a regular kind of an assessment or an audit to see whether you are prepared for these new age threats or not. So I think that's the situation. And I also wanted to highlight, Deepak ji, that there is this survey from the World Economic Forum which says that nowhere in the workforce assessment the shortage of skills so pronounced as is the case in the case of cybersecurity. So that is the worldwide situation. There is a considerable shortage of security in the cybersecurity space as we speak.
Okay, wonderful. So again, I'll check from Dr. De Costa in fact the response.
Yeah. Okay. In fact, your question is based on three sub-questions. The first one is on the skilled cybersecurity force. Well, that's a big challenge. For the past many years, we have been talking up that you require good skilled cybersecurity professionals to be there in any of the verticals. But then that still hasn't happened as what it was expected to be. We have cybersecurity professionals, I would just like to put with an inverted commas, that a theoretical practice is still more as compared to the practical exposure. That's one point of view. We require a large quantum of the cybersecurity, well qualified, trained, practical professional to be there. In terms of the budget, as what we talk for the in terms of the organization technology budget or in terms of the security budget, well, organizations well, few years before were slightly constrained, well, not understanding the power of technology. But I believe in the last few years, and especially during this last 5 to 6 months, organizations have now realized that it's only the technology which can ensure that they shall be sustained. And therefore, under this preview, many organizations today, they have their budgets to be revamped, and most of them have now increased the technology, the security related budget within the organization. As compared to my organization itself, we have taken a stand that the budget what we have got for the manpower, equivalent amount we are now trying to put in technology and in terms of the security. So we are aware that in the days to come, our people, we also shall be working from home remotely, and therefore under these circumstances, I think investing in technology and security becomes a big paramount important. And last but not the least, as far as the remote working is concerned, well, it's a new normal. Well, before the COVID, if any high-flyer professional used to give 100%, for example, well, I think in the remote working can give 110% also, because there are a lot of positives as compared to the negatives also. Positives is a lot of time is now being saved from moving from one place to another place. A lot of time we could now use in ensuring that the mind is used in a lot of R&D research work, so on and so forth. Well, the negative perspective is that getting that quotient of all humans together, as all colleagues together, that has become one of the negative as far as the remote working is concerned. But all in all, I think we all have to accept the new normal, except for few months, till once again we come back to the resurrected glory of all we coming together as one unit, as one team, meeting physically, talking and setting up the goals, objectives, so on and so forth. Well, that's my take, Deepak.
Thank you. So we'll understand from Mr. Sif.
Because once you give control people to work from remote, you want to be assured that it is the authorized personnel who is working for you, whom you have hired, and it will be requiring the some of the one that if you are giving him a corporate device, you are not going for a BYOD or any such kind of a interactions. So then you can have various levels of access privileges, definitely the various levels of security compliance, but you would like them to be having a constant or continuous authentication authorization taking place, which means that like we are having interaction. Most of the organizations, especially in the process areas and call center areas or knowledge KPOs, you will find that people would like to have a highest compliance in terms of the only authorized persons are interacting, and the way we are interacting, so real time the video and audio authentication is happening, which was taken on while onboarding the remote employee. So that will assure that only the authorized persons are the one who are working on the subjects or on the work assigned to them. And similarly, I think there are some people are now working on, which was the case earlier, used to be on the digital banking mobile device, how you interact with the keyboards and the behavioral analytics you are going to capture that. So how does a person interact with the device? So similarly, now people are putting the behavioral analytics for such kind of remote clients, remote working, and capturing the behavior of the employee. And if their different behavior is analyzed, the security operations centers are going to have an alert that this is a suspicious node. So some of those are the areas for the remote working. But at the same time, when you are enabling remote working, naturally people are going for a public cloud based solutions where your development environments, your software as a service, like whether it is a finance softwares, HR softwares, or CRM solutions, all of them are hosted on the public cloud. So what is the best level of authentication, authorization is provided in spite of being from remote? And further going, whether it is various kinds of attack vectors are there, not only just the DDoS, but the DNS level of attack vectors and multi-level of authentication of attack vectors. So all of those need to be much more further strengthened for the going for a remote working and allowing people to work from remote.
Peter, now you share about your experience at the global level.
Sure. First of all, thanks very much for inviting me to join this group. It's very, very informative, and certainly appreciate the various inputs and opinions. From our perspective, certainly as we look at the shifts in the global markets in this area, we actually see the gap in the shortage of security professionals increasing, not decreasing over time. We're also seeing that there is not just a shortage in people, but in the qualifications of those people. So as the attack surfaces are increasing, there is more and more opportunity for bad actors to introduce problems across a much wider range of areas. And unfortunately, our education systems, universities just aren't able to keep up. So as a technology vendor, our part is to help create innovative solutions to some of these problems. And we are as Kemp, we are in a fortunate position where we are effectively occupy both the network part of the challenge, the application side, and on the edge. So we can see as a proxy, we could see the traffic flows coming from end users trying to connect to remote hosted applications. We can see all the web traffic that's coming into the company's environments. And because we are also providing encryption and decryption services, we provide authentication, authorization services for the multi-factor. We integrate with a number of technologies with directory services. We can consume analytics and third-party data, and we are working on some really innovative technology to help bridge all those things together, because as you say, the gaps and the shortage in skills are going to continue to grow. So the only way we see to get ahead is to create innovative solutions to close some of those gaps and try to stay ahead of the game. We've opened up recently, you might have seen on the news, our India Research and Development Center. So we have a number of our highly skilled researchers working in India, and they're working on areas specifically designed to use machine learning and AI technologies, and being able to bridge together the information and the footprints that we're seeing on the network, at the application layer, at the device and the user layer, and bring that together so that some of those challenges can be addressed. And we've had the good fortune of working some of the top and largest companies in India to help through some of the POCs and technologies to solve some of those problems. So in short, from our view, we don't see the shortage getting any better anytime soon. And as a lot of you have mentioned, the remote workforce is only going to increase. Not that remote workforce is new, right? It's just now at such a large scale that it's stressing a lot of the systems in place. A lot of the data centers are experiencing overload. So all of those technologies and systems need to be properly measured and addressed to deal with those challenges.
Wonderful. So the next question is how the security professionals deal with the pressure as attacks become more sophisticated and while the attack surface increases. So I would request all the panelists to stick to the time of 1 minute. Can I start from Chandramouli, sir?
For sure. It's quite challenging. Honestly, it's a thankless job to be always on the toes, really, look at where the threats are and deal with this. So it's not going to be easy. I don't think so. If you're running an hospital, which is pretty mission critical, we do around 200 surgeries a day. You do around 2,000 patient visits almost every day on an ongoing basis. Plus, there is a telemedicine, which is now completely getting digital. I think there is a huge pressure on us for us to maintain business as usual. Some of the things that we did, at least from an IT perspective, is some smart working where a lot of flexibility given to people to deal with some of this mess from wherever they are. I think that's really somewhat helped, but it is a threat that we need to really be on the toes. There had been 1 or 2 instances of fake calls nearly 3-4 years ago when the ransomware threat really came around. I think it was quite a nightmarish time of dealing with this for nearly a week where we had to put in our mitigation measures, although we were not impacted, but the advisories were pretty strong. I think every threat, every advisory makes us to do things much differently, but it is a thankless job.
Thank you. So we'll understand from Mr. Sif. Mr. Sif. Mr. Steve, are you there?
Yeah. Actually, definitely the attack vectors have grown significantly now as people are working from remote. However, there has to be every path needs to be looked into at a level security. But once why to keep only the security at a perimeter level, but it is also need to be looked at if most of these attacks are going to come through cyber way, why don't I stop them right there? So the cloud security solutions are the some of the right answers, so that the layer, the cyber security layer needs to be built at a cloud level itself, so that some of the attacks can be prevented right even outside the perimeter of the data center. And definitely at the perimeter level, all the attack vector paths need to be taken into account much more in detail, and the endpoint security is the paramount, definitely, so which needs to be totally reviewed, whether people adopt the BYOD or people adopt the corporate devices given to the each of their employees working from remote.
Okay. So what, Harnath, your views?
So Deepak, I think we need to see this problem in a different way. I think it's more of prevention than cure, as I was mentioning earlier. I think it's important to make sure that we follow the best practices. First is to make sure that your employees are able to understand the risk of cybersecurity, right? I think to do that, obviously, you need to have clear communication with the employees, increase the awareness amongst them on social engineering, which typically can happen during these times, and this is going to go up as we move forward. And also, you continue to monitor the high-risk users, right? So I think as you focus your efforts onto some of these areas, I think you continue to stay safe and certainly reduce the stress. The other aspect which is important is to invest in the right technology. Look at the best practices in terms of tech. Make sure that your patch management is in place. You have the right VPN solution to access corporate network as well as corporate infrastructure. Try deploying advanced threat protection solutions. Deploy, if possible, integrate with the SOC so that there's a constant monitoring which is going on. try managing the shadow IT. I think that's one of the biggest threats that we CIOs actually see today, because users are obviously getting to access the technology resources outside the technology domain itself. Right? They're able to go and purchase. So I think that's one of the biggest threats which organizations are facing, because your data could potentially be lying wherever. And the last piece, which to my mind, is to fix the processes, right? So I think it's important to promote resilience as we look at the overall security posture. Relook at your VR capabilities. Look at cloud, as she was mentioning. Look at cloud-based solutions so that you are faster in terms of rollout of solutions. And I would say the last bit is to make sure that you manage the security risk related to third parties. I think that's another big area which obviously you need to look at. So to summarize, what I would want to say is, if you manage some of these areas, if you have a clear plan, I think the stress automatically will come down. Right? There's an increased threat that is coming up, but I think it's important to stay prepared than actually get worried about the threat is coming.
Okay, we'll also understand from Mr. Atul.
No, 2-3 points, which I just wanted to add on the context which was brought up. So one is, I think we'll have to create that awareness within the team. It would be, so the awareness has to be done at 2-3 layers. One is at the leadership layer first, that what are the risks which entail if our security posture is not right. So that is one. Second is for the IT team, the information security or the CISO team. No, we'll have to figure out that what they need to do to be able to cope up with these new age threats. And then the user part. So I think, like Harnath also mentioned, the security awareness training is one very important part, wherein you teach or keep on educating the users that what kind of attacks can come. Or maybe it could be in terms of pop-ups, it could be in terms of unsolicited messages, it could be these unsecured websites access. How do you make sure? And then it's not just about educating. You also set up some kind of a simulation so that you keep trying out. You figure out whether they are being practiced or not. So it is like you create some kind of a trial or kind of a simulation you do for phishing, and you then come out with those findings that these many users have actually opened some malicious mail, or which you actually planted it internally just for the trial purposes, testing purposes. So these kind of feedback mechanisms also will help, because sometimes people join trainings just for the sake of it. So you have to close the loop. But importantly, as I said, so you have to first figure out what kind of attacks are there. So then only you will be able to fix it. So it could be in terms of hackers. You may have the insider threats. You may have some issues of data leakage happening because of some competition trying to take your data for some reason. And then sometimes there would be low awareness between the employees themselves, because of which these things may happen. So as I said, combination of tools, trainings, and orientation will make the organization more secure. That's my view.
We will understand from Dr. DeCosta.
I think most of the points are covered by my colleagues in the panel. Just one or two points which I would like to slightly stress upon, and that is what we do is that we have focused now more on the R&D. In fact, as an organization, we work on the cybersecurity practices mostly after the breach has taken place. So normally we do the post-mortem as how the breach has taken place, from where it has taken place, and then of course issue guidelines that how it could be secured, how the organization's network or the resources could be secured. What actually the question what Deepak you have said in terms of the pressures as far as these attacks are concerned, what we have done is that we have set up a dedicated research team, and the job of this research team is to get onto these cases which every day 5 to 6 matters they come, and we figure out that which is that particular case which is hampering the corporate world. Couple of them what we came across, one of them is on the spoofing IP, where many organizations today have become a victim of it. And the second part what we have seen is a huge exponential increase in terms of the ransomware attack. This I'm not talking for the corporates, but this I'm talking for lay individuals. So what we have done is that when we get matters, we have cases related to the cybersecurity breach, the R&D team works exclusively that what is that breach which is on the highest platter, then finds out what could be the viable way to prevent it, protect it, and of course, some of these particular breaches, they take the legal route. So we have one more team formed up, a small team formed up to ensure that if there is any type of a breach which has to take a legal route, then what type of an evidence is required to the law enforcement, to the judicial agency, such as the breaches can be minimized, and the most important, the criminal or the hacker could be caught. Last 4 months, we had almost about 500 odd cases coming to us, and it was a big job. But let me tell you, these 500 odd cases, when you try to put into a bottle, we found out that these are essentially 5 to 6 different types of threats, which basically have been mushroomed into almost about 500 odd cases what we received. So in terms of the cybersecurity pressures, you mean to say, we are geared up to a large extent to ensure that we will not be a victim to a large extent. Of course, I'll not be over optimistic to say that we won't become a victim of cybercrime, because if I do say, then I feel that I'm wrong to my conscience and I'm speaking wrong on this panel. But then risk plan, risk mitigation plan, the severity report, and the most important, the contingency and how to come out of it. This plans or these mitigations now we have put into place, and the same we are trying to create an awareness in terms of training, in terms of case studies approach to a lot of our particular stakeholders, to a lot of our particular clients, to a lot of our particular corporates, such as they would not get to be victimized. Well, that's my say on to it.
Okay. And we now understand from Mr. Peter.
Sure. So the one thing I wanted to mention is that a very common way for security professionals to deal with the pressure is to simply believe that by moving their applications and workloads to the cloud, they're going to magically inherit all the security benefits that are baked within the cloud. And for a lot of businesses, particularly for the smaller and medium-sized organizations, that is largely true. But there are so many gaps, even within the public cloud and private cloud domain, that it is a misnomer to believe that by simply moving applications to the cloud, it's an end-all be-all solution to security. And we see this all the time. We have many customers, particularly the medium and larger customers who have moved their workloads to public clouds like Azure or AWS, where they quickly identify gaps around authentication, around authorization, around web application firewalling, around DNS gaps, where the same technologies that those professionals who are under pressure needed to deploy for on-prem find that they still have to think through these problems in the cloud. Kemp was one of the first technologies that leveraged our security and traffic management capabilities in Microsoft Azure, for example, and also in AWS. And we help companies bridge those gaps, right? So we can help take those workloads that are operating in on-prem environment, and by moving them into the cloud, we help customers find some of those gaps around the edge, on the client side, on the application side, particularly where the public cloud or the private cloud simply doesn't address. And it's very important to keep that in mind, that while moving things into the cloud is in fact going to help things, in many cases there are gaps that all customers should be aware of exist, and they should do proper diligence to analyze where those gaps are and take measures to solve those.
Wonderful. Now there is a rapid fire question. You have to answer the question in one sentence. what is your take on cyber risk management to be part of your business resilience plan across the organization? I'll ask to Harnath Babu.
So I think, Deepak, it is important to have the cyber risk management as one of the key aspects to your business resilience plan. I think it's more around how your plan is centered around preparation, detection, response, and recovery to make sure they are more cyber resilient. As we move into the digital future.
Okay. Now to Atul.
No, I think it's not just about our business. No, we have to also factor the regulations like the privacy, Private Data Protection, Personal Data Protection Act, and no. So these things also you have to factor, which will ensure that you would continue to be in business. So I think today it's not as difficult to reach out to your stakeholders and explain the nuances around cybersecurity. So only thing is we have to be careful and cautious about it. I think that's the short answer I will want to bring.
Mr. Chandramouli.
Yeah, let me be very specific to healthcare. Pandemic had really made our lives a lot more difficult. We had always had an emergency response, and hygiene has been one of our core issues. But almost whatever we knew had to completely change post-pandemic, but we are still dealing with the crisis as it really evolves. I think just like what we heard right now, there are a lot of regulations which keep changing. So there's a lot of education which keeps coming every day to deal with this. The good thing is we are yet to be impacted with any of these pandemic scenarios yet, although we are dealing with close to around 600, 700 patients every day. I think we are fairly in good shape, but I think it's every day it's a crisis we need to deal with. So we have to be on a heightened state of attention to deal with the mess that is being created. Business continuity and risk are critical for our engagement.
We'll understand from Mr. Steve. Mr. Steve, you have to unmute. Mr. Shah, yeah.
Yeah,
Steve.
Cyber security is a key for the business resilience now when we have moved the business processes to remote. So whether the multi-level of authorizations which were carried out for the various transactions, and while the whole staff was co-located, so that has really the large impact where people used to get the things for within the same co-located staff. Now all these processes have to be now workflow driven, as well as having the remote capability given to the people, so that they can handle the sensitive data, as Atul was mentioning, that how the sensitive data needs to be handled while working from remote. So all those auditing and monitoring needs are very much need to be there in the business applications. While designing the business processes, all these are the key ingredients now that applications need to be enabled for the in-office staff as well as for the remote staff. That's the right business requirement for the business resilience going forward.
Okay, I will understand from Mr. Peter.
Sure. For us, it really comes down to two things, right? We focus on technology and innovation to address the gaps that are constantly growing, but simply looking at technology innovation is not enough. We know that there are companies under tremendous pressure from costs and budget to instrumenting. So not only do we need to make things technologically advanced, we also have to make sure that we actually help to reduce their costs and budgets that are being allocated to security solutions. So that's very important as well.
Wonderful, sir. My last question would be, last but not the least, who is the weakest link in the cybersecurity chain?
So Deepak, if I can take a stab on that.
Yes, please. One sentence answer.
Yeah, sure. Cyber attacks become successful only when somebody either manually feeds data or intentionally or unintentionally, right? So I think humans obviously are the weakest link in cybersecurity. What's important is to make sure that there are regular trainings and timely communications and spread awareness so that they are keeping themselves safe from cyber attacks. Even though whichever technology you may have as a business, you may invest in sophisticated technologies, but if your people are not trained, I think you will continue to fall prey to cybersecurity risks.
Mr. Siv, you are on mute. Yeah. Mr. Siv, you have to unmute.
Yes, please go ahead.
Who is the weakest link in the cybersecurity chain?
Weakest link is the could be any employee, as I think in some of the panelists have mentioned already. The cyber security awareness while working from remote, I think, needs to be enhanced. So the cyber security trainings need to be really stepped up.
Okay, wonderful. Dr. Chandramouli.
Yeah, see, conventionally, the standard answer is the people, but we might have the greatest people, but without established the proven processes and knowledge and tools, I think it's bound to fail. So there has to be a focused attention on almost the entire supply chain of how do you disseminate the knowledge and the information and really protect your digital assets. People, processes, and technology together have to make the decided impact.
Wonderful. Mr. Atul.
I think capability.
Your network is poor. Hello. Okay, we'll come back to Atul. In the meantime, we'll take input from Mr. Dr. DeCosta.
I think a lot of my panelist colleagues have said human is the weakest link. I just want to add one more thing. I think one more thing to be pondered is the law. We have a very outdated law, and till this law is not amended, I think all what we talk about the cybersecurity breaches will just remain on the piece of the paper, and nothing will shall get to be implemented. For me, I will take on law is the weakest link that has to be amended.
And we'll understand from Mr. Atul. We could not hear you. Mr. Atul, I think he's not in the line. Mr. Atul. Okay, we'll understand from Mr. Peter.
Sure. So we see, as you can imagine, many different challenges in the chain of attacks. It seems though, if we somehow manage to take away email access from employees, it would solve a lot of problems. No matter what we do over the years, it seems that by far the most popular attack vector is to send malicious email phishing attacks to unsuspecting employees. But as much as there is already innovation and technology available to try to deal with that, focusing on the custody chain of data is still the most important. Figure out what data is the most important to the organization, and can you adequately, clearly visualize and understand what that chain of custody is and where the potential gaps are, and try to address it that way. But second to taking away email access.
So it's a very nice input, and I would like to thank all my panelists, Mr. Atul, Dr. DeCosta, Mr. Siv, Mr. Chandramouli, Mr. Harnath Babu, and Mr. Peter. Thanks for joining the panel and great inputs, and thank you, gentlemen, for sharing wonderful response during the panel discussion, enlightening us through the process. Thank you very much.
Wonderful inputs. These informations tell us how important is cybersecurity and protecting our sensitive data, personal identifiable information, protected health information, personal information, and intellectual property.